Good evening, my dear adventurers. It's Yisselda, your guide to tonight's tale of adventure. Together, we'll step softly into the wondrous magical world of Clair Obscur Expedition 33, a game in which I've wandered in for over 100 hours now, and with every moment I've fallen more deeply in love with its beautiful landscapes, its amazing story, and the brave souls who called it home. As you settle into your cozy space, feel the day's weight gently dissolve. Let your mind grow calm, your body soft and still. With every breath, you're drifting closer to the peaceful edges of sleep, where stories live between waking and dreaming. Now, take a slow, deep breath in and let it out with a gentle sigh. Feel your muscles soften, your shoulders releasing any tension, your hands resting loosely, your legs sinking comfortably into the bed or chair. Imagine a soft wave of warmth flowing from the top of your head, slowly down your neck, your chest, and all the way to your toes. With every breath, you become lighter, floating gently in a sea of calm. When you feel ready, allow your eyelids to close and let yourself drift softly through this tale of shadow and light in the land of the continent where wonder waits just beyond the horizon. Our tale begins in the quiet city of Lumière, with its cobblestone streets lined with tall, ornate lampposts, its shuttered boulangeries and cafes and restaurants, the town square with its fountain where children once gathered and played. In this city of lights, a tale unfolds, a tale of sorrow and hope, of painted dreams and realities cut all too short. For 67 years, the people of Lumière endured what came to be called the gommage, an annual ritual where the enigmatic Paintress inscribed a number upon a distant monolith. All who reached that age vanished, dissolving into petals carried by the wind. This relentless culling spared none, and the age decreed diminished with each passing year. It began soon after the shattering, a devastating event that blasted the continent into pieces, destroying the world of its peace and filling it with the strange and dangerous creatures called nevrons. By the grace of luck, a small portion of Lumière was transported to the south of the continent, becoming its own island away from the dangerous mainland. It first started with the number 100 inscribed onto the monolith. Monolith year 100. At first, people didn't know what that meant, but at each passing year, more and more residents began to disappear. First, great-grandmothers and great-grandfathers, then grandmothers and grandfathers. One could walk out of a room for only a few minutes, and upon their return, their loved one would be gone, with no trace but a scattering of red and white petals and a dusting of ash. Nobody could explain these disappearances until it began to happen in front of their very own eyes. One moment, there they were, going about their day like any other day, conversing with their loved one, sipping coffee, playing with their child, and in all but a second, it was as if the essence of their being shifted as they dissolved into red and white petals and ash. All gone, with nothing left but silence. In monolith year 84, the first expedition in 15 years was sent out. Not as a search and rescue, unlike the first, but in a mission to reach the Paintress and to stop the never-ending cycle of the gommage. But as each year passed, more and more people dissolved, and the number became lower and lower. And even after 67 years, no expedition had ever returned. This year was monolith year 33. In the waning light of day, beneath skies bruised with the fading hues of dusk, there gathered a company of souls, burdened by fate and determined with hope. The ship, a sturdy vessel carved from dark timber and sealed with the sap of ancient trees, rocked on the restless waves. Its sails billowed, catching the breath of a cold and steady wind that whistled through the rigging as it surged forward from the port of Lumière. Above, the heavens were a deep, bruised violet, where the last light of day bled slowly into the encroaching night. Gustave leaned against the rail, the wood worn smooth beneath his fingers, his gaze fixed toward the shrinking silhouette of Lumière. The island, once vibrant and alive with the laughter of children and the hustle and bustle of people going about their day, now seemed cloaked in shadow, a place forever altered by the gommage's terrible wrath. His mechanical arm, a marvel forged in pain and hope, caught the dying light. Unconsciously, Gustave clenched and unclenched his cold steel fingers, his mind elsewhere. Sophie's voice lingered in his head, like a song half remembered. Her cheeks had been wet with tears before she was gone in front of his very eyes. He had held her hand for as long as he could. Deep regret weighed on his heart. Why had he waited so long on the day of her gommage to reconnect? Beside him, Maëlle paced with restless energy. Her flame-red hair, tied into a ponytail, blew gently across her freckled face, her pale blue eyes alight with both determination and an uncertainty of what was to come. Despite her usual bright, coquettish demeanour, her eyes held a glimpse of the sorrows she had already endured by the tender age of 16. As young as she had longed to break free from the island, from her nomadic life of moving family to family, experiencing loss after loss. Now that she had been adopted by Gustave and his sister Emma as her official guardians, she was still confident, perhaps 90% confident, of the decision she had made to join the expedition at such a young age. Near the mast, Lumière knelt quietly, engrossed in whatever research journal she had managed to bring with her. She had an air of seriousness about her, of one not to be trifled with. Her dark hair fell in waves around her face, the blue-green luminescence of the journal casting a soft glow on her pale skin and dark almond eyes. Alan, the commander, his long hair pulled back in a bun at the nape of his neck, stood ready and alert at Lumière's side as she whispered her readings to him. Nearby, looking over the water, Ciel stood, statuesque and silent, the very image of calm strength despite the nervousness and turmoil that swelled within. Her eyes were fixed on the sea, the vast endless expanse of relentless waves that filled her with unease and made the hair rise on her skin. She ached for those she had loved so incredibly and so deeply, and those she had lost. The sound of the waves of the sea and the sight of the endless ocean brought back memories she would rather forget. Between them and the many other expeditioners that had joined this year's journey, the air was thick with nerves and unspoken fears and hopes. A fragile tension binding them as surely as the ropes that tethered the sails. Jérôme, Tristan, Lucien, Margot, Léo, Catherine, and many others sat quietly, talking little amongst themselves. The laughter, the wine, the cake, and the festivities of the previous night were long behind them. The sea stretched out, vast and inscrutable, a mirror to the sky's deepening twilight. Waves brushed against the hull like soft hands urging them forward, as if the sea knew their purpose. The fading light flickered on petals scattered around the boat and upon the water, fragile remnants of a world left behind. These petals were more than flowers. They were memories, prayers, echoes of those who would never see the dawn again. As the island's outline faded into the darkening mist, Alan's voice broke the silence, low and steady. We carry more than hope on this journey. We carry the weight of every soul who believed we could change what has been. The ship creaked and groaned, sails snapping in the wind like the wings of a great beast awakening from slumber. And with a surge of wood and wave, the vessel pushed beyond the last grasp of land, entering the unknown. A fragile flame flickering against the dark, a hope born from loss, sailing into the endless night. The ship ran aground against the shore with a long, bone-deep groan. As Lumière had instructed, they had landed upon the first known location of Expedition Zero, in an effort to retrace their steps. The darkness was heavy around them, and the wind carried no birdsong, only the hush of absence, as though sound itself had been turned to ash. Gustave braced himself, metal fingers wrapped around the ship's rigging, gaze fixed not on the land ahead, but on the silence that greeted them. Lumière whispered behind him, her voice nearly lost in the stillness. "This place does not want us." One by one, the members of Expedition 33 disembarked. First Alan, then Lumière, followed by Gustave and Maël and Ciel, then the others, boots sinking into the dark, damp sand, eyes scanning into the fog-draped darkness. Tension filled the air as they made their way forward, one foot slowly and softly in front of the other. No threat came, no greeting, no storm, no sudden blaze. Just the sea behind them and the world before them, waiting with unnatural stillness. Alan stepped forward, his face alert with caution and tense unease. He had not taken 3 paces when the fog before them shifted and parted, almost like a stage curtain. And through the fog walked a man. He was of older bearing, tall, composed, with a slow, precise gait that echoed across the earth, the sound of his cane punctuating the air. He wore a dark suit of a bygone era, finely pressed, the edges kissed by dust. A cape hung heavy from his shoulders. In his right hand, he bore a simple walking stick, carved of rich brown wood. There was no sigil, no sword, no threat in its design. Only in the man's eyes did death show itself. Quiet, assured, patient. Alan hesitated. He called out to the man, asking how he had come to be in a world where older people did not exist. Silence. The man regarded him, a look in his eyes that was almost of sorrow, of regret. Then the walking stick moved. There was a brilliant flash, and in the blur of motion, a sudden lurch of air. Alan's head fell from his shoulders with terrifying ease, rolling silently onto the sand. For one moment, the world held its breath. Then it shattered. The man moved like a blade remembering its purpose. With each step, a life ended. His cane cracked with explosive bright yellow energy. Another fell, a woman crying out for her sister. Then another, and another. The expedition's line broke, screams rising into the grey. Gustave ran as explosions and confusion and screams and fog surrounded him. He sensed Maël running behind him when, out of the darkness, they appeared. The first Nevrons they had ever laid their eyes on. They were grotesque, their form made of giant pale hands and cloaked in black. They floated before them, fingers curling, fingertips touching, as a ball of white energy formed within the abyss of its touching palms. Gustave held Maël back, and time seemed to stand still as an explosion hit and he found himself soaring through the air, landing with a painful thud a few meters away. A loud buzzing filled his ears, and he tried to move but to no avail. In the distance, on the shore of the beach, and backlit by the fierce fire that now engulfed their ship, he could see Maëlle, her small body strewn on the sand. He tried to shout to her, to move, but the fall had winded him painfully. Smoke stung his eyes and his lungs as he tried to gasp for air. As he watched on in his catatonic state, Gustave could barely make out a lone figure crouched over Maëlle's body, a figure cloaked in shadow against the bright light of the explosions and fire and fog. Just as his eyes closed and his vision went dark. Gustave awoke with a start, his heart racing. It took him several moments to gather his senses and remember where he was. Nearby, the campfire continued to crackle, and in the distance he could hear the rushing water of a brook. The scent of pine and grass and earth filled his lungs, and he remembered now that he was safe at camp, and several days had passed since landing on the continent, since landing on the dark shores of the beach. A taste of ash came upon Gustave's tongue as the memory of fire and screams and explosions haunted the edges of his mind. The faces, his friends, once bright and resolute and brave with wine and purpose, were gone now, lost to the night of fog and to those giant two-handed creatures shrouded in black, and to the white-haired man. The vision came unbidden, a figure draped in old world's dignity, cloaked in nightfall, and a cane that cleaved men as a scythe through wheat. Alan's head had fallen like fruit from a tree. The rest? No, there had been no rest. Only darkness and the things that came with it. Gustave turned his head, his eyes searching through the dim glow of the fire. There they were, Maëlle and Nune, resting peacefully while he should have been keeping sentinel. He shook his head as if to rid himself of sleep. Let's not let that happen again, he thought to himself. He did not want the white-haired man infiltrating their camp on his watch. The scent of wood smoke lingered in the air, and the embers of the campfire glowed as he moved to stand. His body felt heavy, his head ached, and his neck sore from dozing off at an uncomfortable angle. Gustave rummaged through his backpack until his fingers grasped the one thing that could keep him occupied and awake till morning. His journal, gifted by his apprentices. The paper had been mulched, pressed, dried and bound with their very own hands. The cover, thick and dark and decorated ornately with black and gold, had his name scrawled in cursive handwriting, which he recognized as Sophie's. With his journal and a pencil in hand, Gustave walked only a few paces from the campfire towards the edge of the cliff where he sat, looking over the moonlit treetops of the continent, and in the distance the valleys and cascading waterfalls flowing into crystalline rivers. He was reminded of how beautiful the land beyond Lumière was. Gustave put his pencil to the paper. What would he write? Memories of the last several days came back to him, waking up on the beach, Maël gone, being attacked, finding his way through the cave, gazing upon the piles and piles of bodies strewn around him, the bodies of previous expeditioners. The people of Lumière knew that each expedition that left each year was not likely to return, but they were sent out with the hope that the next expedition would make it just that one bit further. When one falls, we continue, he thought to himself. Right? But seeing it in front of his eyes, it was something else. His thoughts went to the dark place, the place where Lune had found him, and out of which she had pulled him. Gustave sighed. He knew that as long as he lived, these memories would now forever haunt him. He reflected. In a way, Lumière was a shelter and haven. There, they were safe and free to live out their lives as they saw fit. They were free to live and to love and dream, and when the time came, as heartbreaking as it was, they knew when it was time to say goodbye. Surely we must be doing the right thing, he thought. By killing the Paintress, we'll end the cycle. No longer shall we have to live in fear of our next goodbyes. Gustave looked down and started writing. Day 3. My dear apprentices, March has passed since we landed on the continent. The land is vast and beautiful and spectacular, with green and red and yellow forests, filled with rivers leading into waterfalls. The world beyond our little town of Lumière is equally beautiful as it is terrifying. Nevrons are no joke. We lost many to the ones that were on the beach. I can only describe them as large hands cloaked in black. That's all I remember of them. Luckily, Lune found me, and together we travelled to the indigo tree in search for others, per expedition protocol, according to Lune. But there were no others, only more Nevrons, and bodies, many bodies from past expeditions. At the indigo tree, we found a note instructing us to find Maël at a hut in a place with weird corals. We don't know who could have written that note, but that was the only lead we had. The weird corals turned out to be a spectacular place. Walking through it was almost as if you were underwater, with bubbles floating in the air and tall aquatic plants swaying gently in unseen currents. It was truly a spectacle to behold. There were more Nevrons, different kinds, more formidable than the last. But the arm that we created was incredibly useful against them, and I am glad to report that the Lumière converter is working wonderfully, as intended and as designed by yours truly, of course. We did find Maël. We came upon a door, and it pulled us into a grand mansion, gilded in obsidian and gold. The wonders of this world are vast and contrasting, but I'm so relieved that she is safe and unharmed from the beach. How she came to be at the mansion she couldn't really say or remember, but the most important thing is that she's alive. And gestrels. I'm also pleased to report that gestrels are indeed real. We met one named Noko, who advised us to head to the Gestrel village in order to enlist the help of, guess who? The legendary Esquier. Both are real. Already, Noko and Mael have become almost like old buddies. It's very charming. Noko is a merchant, but before we could buy anything, he wanted a fight. Luckily, we have our Lumina converter, and Mael is a lot stronger than she looks. Noko seemed to thoroughly enjoy the duel. Apparently, Jastrals love fighting. Who knew? Noko told us to meet him at the Gestral village and then ran off without so much as any clear directions except look for the red trees. This will be our task as soon as the sun rises. After the past few days, the setback of the expedition being almost completely gone, there perhaps rests some hope yet. Signing off for now. I'll go back and rest a bit. Tomorrow comes. Gustave. Gustave looked up as he rubbed his eyes and his face with his hands, and sat for a moment, hunched over and completely still. He had left out many things in his entry, but it was best that they didn't know. Behind him, he heard the faint crunch of grass and leaves, soft and tentative. He recognized them as Lune's, even before she was beside him, putting her hand on his shoulder as she sat down, legs crossed. He looked over to her. You should get some more rest. It's not yet daylight. I can't sleep, Lune sighed. You know how it is. Gustave responded softly. Yeah. She nodded towards the journal now resting open in his lap. What are you writing? Journal logs. It was a gift from my apprentices, he responded. Maybe someday I can bring it back to them and they can read all about our journey, you know, with my gun and your sparks. Lune chuckled. Good one. The two sat in comfortable silence as a hush settled over the trees and the valleys below, and the stars began to fade. Dawn came softly, as it often did, even in Lumière. The eastern sky lifted gently from indigo to ash grey, then to rose and soft gold. The green leaves of the trees below glinted, and the waters of the rushing rivers glistened crystalline in the blue hour. Mist coiled low among the grasses, silver-veined and slow-moving. It clung to the roots of the trees and the hollows of the land, as though reluctant to let the night go. In the distance, a flock of pale-winged birds rose like a sigh, turning westward into the wind. Why is it always birds that get to fly away first? Lune muttered. Gustave smiled faintly. His eyes no longer stung from weariness. They were calm now, clear, as though emptied of all they had held the nights before. Behind them, Mael stirred. She turned, brows furrowing, lips parting with the breath of a dream departing, or a nightmare. Gustave rose and knelt beside her, quiet as a prayer. Lune followed behind him. Mael opened her eyes slowly, as though waking into a world she did not expect to see again. Gustave? She whispered, almost uncertainly, her voice husky from sleep. He nodded. I'm here. Is it morning? She asked, though she knew the answer. It is, he said. The first we've seen together on the continent. She looked at him, truly looked, and something passed between them. Not words, not yet, but the recognition of pain endured and shared. Her hand reached out, and he took it without thinking. The three of them sat together then, sharing pieces of almost stale baguette as their breakfast. Huddled close, they watched the sun rise over the far edge of the continent, the land stretching before them, wide and wild, veiled in morning gold. Ahead of them lay the red forests that would lead them to the Gestural village, and to Esquier, and finally to the Paintress. But for now, they simply sat in the stillness, just the sun and the wind, and the breath of three souls who had survived, and that for the moment was enough.